On October 28, 2007, a quiet suburban neighborhood in Bolingbrook, Illinois, became the center of a disturbing mystery. Stacy Peterson, a 23-year-old mother of two, vanished without a trace. Her sudden disappearance not only left her family and friends in anguish, but also cast a shadow over the seemingly peaceful community. As the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, one pressing question remained unanswered. What happened to Stacy Peterson? Welcome to That Police Officer channel, where we explore law enforcement stories, crime investigations, and the realities behind the badge. If you're passionate about uncovering the truth within crime stories, you've found the right place. Please subscribe, like, and share our videos to support our mission. Stacy Ann Callis was born on January 20th, 1984, in Downers Grove, Illinois. She grew up in a large family and faced challenges early in life. Her mother disappeared when Stacy was young, an event that deeply affected her. Despite this, Stacy was known for her bright personality, kindness, and deep love for her family. She had a strong bond with her siblings and took on a caring role for those around her. In her late teens, Stacy met Drew Peterson, a Bolingbrook police officer who was 30 years older than her. Their relationship quickly became serious, and at just 17 years old, Stacy moved in with Drew. They married in 2003, shortly after Drew's third wife, Kathleen Savio, was found dead in her bathtub under suspicious circumstances. Stacy became a stepmother to Drew's children from previous marriages and later had 2 children of her own with him. Bolingbrook, Illinois, where the couple lived, was a typical suburban town, known for its family-friendly neighborhoods, schools, and quiet streets. It was the kind of place where people felt safe, where crime was not something residents worried about. But behind the doors of the Peterson home, tensions were growing. Those close to Stacy noticed changes in her over the years. Once full of life, she became more reserved and often seemed anxious. She confided in family and friends that she was unhappy in her marriage and hinted at wanting to leave Drew. However, she also expressed fear. Then, in October 2007, Stacy disappeared, leaving behind 2 young children and a growing number of unanswered questions. In the days leading up to October 28th, Stacy Peterson had been experiencing significant stress and anxiety. She confided in her sister, Cassandra Callis, expressing fears about her marriage to Drew Peterson. Stacy had reportedly been considering divorce and had become increasingly anxious about her future. On the morning of her disappearance, Stacy contacted a friend around 10 a.m. to arrange assistance with painting a house later that day. This was the last known communication from her. When she failed to appear for the scheduled appointment and did not respond to calls, concern grew among her family and friends. Drew Peterson claimed that Stacy left their home between 10 and 11 a.m. on October 28th, stating she was going to help a friend paint a house. He alleged that she later called him at 9 p.m., informing him that she was leaving him for another man and would not be returning. Drew also mentioned that Stacy had taken some cash, her passport, and her bikini when she left. Stacy's family found Drew's account implausible. They insisted that Stacy would never abandon her children without any explanation. Her sister reported her missing to the police at 4 a.m. on October 29th, 2007. Friends and family highlighted that Stacy had been unhappy in her marriage and had expressed intentions to leave Drew, but they did not believe she would do so without ensuring the well-being of her children. Law enforcement initially treated Stacy's disappearance as a missing person case. However, as details emerged about her troubled marriage and Drew's previous relationships, suspicion began to mount. Investigators learned that Drew's third wife, Kathleen Savio, had been found dead in her bathtub under mysterious circumstances in 2004, a case that was initially ruled an accidental drowning but was later re-examined. During the investigation, Drew maintained that Stacy had left voluntarily. He suggested that she was under the care of a psychiatrist, taking medication for anxiety and depression, and had been irritable and short-tempered prior to her disappearance. Drew also claimed to have received an anonymous letter stating that Stacy was seen alive and well in Peoria, Illinois. Despite Drew's assertions, authorities and Stacy's family remained skeptical. The circumstances surrounding her disappearance, coupled with the history of Drew's previous marriage, led investigators to consider foul play. As the search for Stacy continued, the community grappled with the unsettling possibility that her disappearance was not a simple case of a wife leaving her husband, but something far more sinister. In the immediate aftermath, extensive searches were conducted in and around Bolingbrook, involving law enforcement and volunteers. Despite these efforts, no trace of Stacy was found. The case drew national attention, with media outlets highlighting the mysterious circumstances and the potential connection to Kathleen Savio's death. As days turned into weeks, the lack of concrete evidence left Stacy's family in a state of anguish and uncertainty. They continued to appeal to the public for information, holding on to hope while fearing the worst. The community's perception of Drew shifted as more details about his past and his behavior following Stacy's disappearance came to light. The community of Bolingbrook, a typically quiet suburb of Chicago, was deeply unsettled by Stacy's sudden disappearance. Residents organized search parties, distributed flyers, and held vigils, demonstrating a collective commitment to finding Stacy and supporting her family during this distressing time. However, the investigation faced significant challenges. Drew Peterson, a veteran police sergeant with the Bolingbrook Police Department, was not only Stacy's husband, but also a seasoned law enforcement officer. His intimate knowledge of police procedures and potential influence within the department raised concerns about the impartiality and effectiveness of the investigation. To mitigate these concerns, the Illinois State Police took the lead, ensuring an objective approach. As the search intensified, investigators encountered several false leads and misdirections that complicated their efforts. Rick Mims, a longtime friend of Drew Peterson, revealed that he and Drew had purchased 3 blue plastic containers in 2003. This information led to speculation that such a container might have been used in Stacy's disappearance. However, searches failed to locate these containers, leaving this lead unsubstantiated. Thomas Morphy, Drew's stepbrother, alleged that he assisted Drew in carrying a large, sealed container from the Peterson home to Drew's vehicle shortly after Stacy vanished. Morphy, who had a history of substance abuse, later attempted suicide, expressing fear that he had unwittingly helped dispose of Stacy's body. Despite the gravity of his claims, the lack of physical evidence made it challenging for investigators to corroborate his account. Reports emerged that a man resembling Drew Peterson, accompanied by another individual, approached truck drivers at a Bolingbrook truck stop around 3:30 a.m. on October 29, 2007. They allegedly requested assistance in transporting a package to an undisclosed location. While this account raised suspicions, authorities could not verify its authenticity, and it ultimately did not advance the investigation. These false leads not only diverted valuable resources, but also prolonged the uncertainty and anguish experienced by Stacy's family and the Bolingbrook community. Let's go back in time to discuss about the tragic death of the third wife of Drew Peterson. In March 2004, Kathleen Savio, the third wife of Bolingbrook police officer Drew Peterson, was found dead in her bathtub. The 40-year-old's body was discovered face down in a dry bathtub, with a gash on the back of her head. At the time, her death was ruled an accidental drowning, and the case was closed without further investigation. The circumstances surrounding Kathleen's death were troubling. She and Drew had divorced in 2003 after a tumultuous relationship marked by allegations of domestic abuse and numerous calls to the police. Despite these red flags, authorities accepted the initial autopsy findings, which suggested that Kathleen had slipped, fallen, and drowned in her bathtub. In October 2007, Stacy Peterson, Drew's fourth wife, disappeared without a trace. Her sudden disappearance cast a new light on Kathleen's death, prompting authorities to re-examine the case. Investigators began to question the likelihood of two of Drew's wives meeting untimely and suspicious ends. As part of the renewed investigation, Kathleen's body was exhumed in November 2007 for a second autopsy. This examination revealed evidence of a struggle, including multiple bruises and a deep laceration on her head, suggesting that her death was not accidental. Consequently, the cause of death was reclassified from accidental drowning to homicide. The reclassification of Kathleen's death intensified scrutiny on Drew Peterson. In May 2009, he was arrested and charged with her murder. During the trial, prosecutors argued that Drew had the motive and opportunity to kill Kathleen, especially given their contentious divorce and custody battles. In September 2012, Drew Peterson was found guilty of Kathleen's murder and later sentenced to 38 years in prison. The connection between Stacy's disappearance and Kathleen's murder highlighted significant flaws in the initial investigation and raised questions about how such cases are handled, especially when they involve law enforcement officers. Following the reclassification of Kathleen Savio's death as a homicide, law enforcement intensified their focus on Drew Peterson, the former Bolingbrook police sergeant and Kathleen's ex-husband. This renewed scrutiny aimed to uncover the truth behind both Kathleen's death and the disappearance of Stacy Peterson, Drew's fourth wife. Investigators delved into Drew's personal life, uncovering a pattern of alleged abusive behavior towards his spouses. Witnesses came forward with testimonies that painted a troubling picture of domestic turmoil. For instance, a former co-worker of Kathleen testified that Drew had once thrown Kathleen to the floor, grabbed her throat, and threatened her life. Such accounts suggested a history of violence that could have culminated in fatal consequences. The legal proceedings introduced a pivotal element: hearsay evidence. Traditionally, hearsay, statements made outside of court, are inadmissible in trials. However, Illinois passed legislation, informally known as Drew's Law, permitting certain hearsay statements in cases where the witness is unavailable, and there is a strong indication that the defendant may have been responsible for their absence. This allowed the court to consider statements from both Kathleen and Stacy, providing insight into their fears and experiences. Throughout this period, Drew Peterson maintained a public persona that many found unsettling. He frequently appeared in media interviews, often displaying a cavalier and sometimes jocular demeanor. His comments and behavior during these appearances were perceived by many as inappropriate, given the gravity of the situations involving his former wives. Following his arrest, Peterson's bail was set at $20 million, reflecting the severity of the charges against him. The trial proceedings commenced in July 2012, drawing significant media attention due to the high-profile nature of the case and the involvement of a former law enforcement officer. The prosecution's strategy centered on establishing a pattern of abusive behavior by Peterson towards his wives, particularly Kathleen Savio and his fourth wife, Stacy Peterson, who had disappeared in 2007. Prosecutors aimed to demonstrate that Savio's death was not an accident, but a premeditated act by Peterson to prevent her from obtaining a favorable divorce settlement and custody of their children. One of the most compelling pieces of hearsay evidence came from Reverend Neil Scory, a pastor at Stacy Peterson's church. Scory testified that Stacy had confided in him about Drew's involvement in Kathleen's death, stating that Drew had killed Kathleen and made it look like an accident. This testimony provided insight into Stacy's fears and suggested that Drew had a history of manipulating situations to his advantage. Additionally, Mary Parks, a close friend of Kathleen Savio, testified that she had observed marks around Kathleen's neck approximately a year before her death. This observation supported the prosecution's argument that Kathleen had been subjected to physical abuse, contradicting the initial ruling of accidental drowning. The defense, on the other hand, sought to challenge the credibility of the hearsay evidence, arguing that it was unreliable and should not be considered by the jury. They contended that without direct evidence linking Peterson to Savio's death, the prosecution's case was built on speculation and uncorroborated statements. The defense also highlighted the lack of physical evidence tying Peterson to the crime scene, emphasizing that the original investigation had concluded Savio's death was accidental. Throughout the trial, Peterson's demeanor attracted attention. He often appeared confident and at times dismissive, which some observers interpreted as arrogance. This behavior may have influenced public perception and potentially the jury's view of his character. A significant moment in the trial occurred when the court allowed the introduction of testimony from Jeff Pachter, who claimed that Peterson had offered him $25,000 to find someone to kill Kathleen Savio. Pachter testified that Peterson had approached him with this proposition before Savio's death, indicating premeditation. This testimony bolstered the prosecution's argument that Peterson had a motive and had planned to murder Savio to avoid financial loss and custody disputes. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury found Drew Peterson guilty of first-degree murder on September 6, 2012. The verdict marked a significant moment in the case, as it was rare for a conviction to be secured primarily on circumstantial and hearsay evidence. The use of Drew's law set a precedent for future cases involving unavailable witnesses and highlighted the legal system's adaptability in the pursuit of justice. In February 2013, Peterson was sentenced to 38 years in prison for the murder of Kathleen Savio. In the years following his conviction, Peterson faced additional legal challenges. In 2016, he was found guilty of attempting to solicit the murder of James Glasgow, the prosecutor who had secured his conviction in Savio's case. This conviction added 40 years to his existing prison sentence, effectively ensuring that Peterson would spend the remainder of his life incarcerated. Stacy Peterson's family, while still grappling with her unresolved disappearance, found some solace in the fact that Peterson was held accountable for Savio's death. They continued to advocate for answers regarding Stacy's whereabouts, urging anyone with information to come forward. In recent years, Cassandra has employed advanced sonar technology to search waterways, believing she has identified images resembling human remains in an Illinois canal. However, these findings have yet to lead to definitive conclusions, and law enforcement agencies continue to follow up on all credible leads. The enduring mystery of Stacy Peterson's disappearance serves as a poignant reminder of the work still needed to protect individuals from domestic violence and to improve the mechanisms for investigating and resolving such cases. It calls upon society to remain vigilant, to support those in abusive relationships, and to advocate for systemic changes that prioritize the safety and well-being of all individuals.